There it goes. All right, so you've probably been reading a lot about these mega merger corporations that are becoming more mega as they merge. It's kind of how this thing works. And they sort of become background noise after a while, just big companies getting bigger. But these are super important for a lot of reasons. And I'm going to dive into like one particular niche of one particular merger, how it's probably going to go in the future, and why it's been kind of bad in the past. And I want to warn you, it's going to look a little bit like this as we go through it, but I want you to trust me. It's all going to make sense at some point. It is actually all connected. And also, I'm going to sound like I'm going to get mad at a cartoon dog for a while, but don't worry, he's been a good boy. Okay, so now a quick poll for the audience. Raise your hand if you recognize this character. Dang, that's pretty easy. That's Scooby Doo. Came on the scene in 1969, and he rode around with 4 teenagers / young adults. The age was kind of variable, but he helped them solve mysteries. Now, Shaggy and Velma and Daphne and Fred and Scooby were kind of the template for a lot of shows that have come about since then. Everything from old school cartoons to like, they even call these guys the Scooby Gang on Buffy. And it's gone through a lot of changes, so like it's still an active franchise. Some of those changes have not been for that reaction. Well, yeah, if you're not familiar, that's Scrappy Doo. He's kind of the Jar Jar Binks of the Scoobyverse. Anyway, this started in 1969 from Hanna-Barbera. They are now currently owned by Warner Brothers Discovery, and they've been in the news. So HBO Max, formerly known as Max, formerly known as HBO Go, formerly known as HBO, is currently owned by Warner Brothers Discovery. They are now part of a giant merger with Paramount Plus. That's CBS and the Paramount Plus app and a lot of those things. That's where your CSIs and things come from. This merger has a lot of stuff going on. I'm not going to get into the political implications or like the news or business parts, because these mega merger companies, like if you get a podcast, if you want to hear about the details of that, there's plenty available. The thing is with these is that the news isn't going to cover this very well, because the news is owned by these companies and they want to get this approved because the current administration is moody. I want to focus on something called intellectual property in the biz, that is Hollywood. This is known as IP. So whenever IP does this at a corporate level, you get a lot of the inevitable crossover. And these are all things that have actually happened on Scooby Doo franchises over the decades. It's been a wild ride. It's going to get even weirder if HBO and Paramount do that thing, because now you can like remodel CBS News in under 60 minutes, minus the commercials. These guys are going to fit in perfectly with the CSI franchise. I mean, Barry Allen is literally a forensic scientist. And the Red Wedding is going to work well for Game of Thrones or Star Trek. Either one, you've got this covered. It's seamless. I'm still a little concerned about how Warner Brothers Discovery is going to manage this based on their history. It's been a little sketchy. I mean, just the naming alone. This happened over 5 years. They took the HBO out of HBO for a while, just kind of taking the pizza out of like Mississippi Pizza. Like, it's just, why would you do that? But the other thing you run into with this is like, sure, they've turned out some good content. Like the 2 new Dune movies are just, they're beautiful. And Superman has been directed by the guy who put the in the Suicide Squad. One word makes a huge difference. But they've also done things like write off an entire finished Batgirl movie for a tax write-off. They sold Looney Tunes, like the cornerstone of Warner Brothers. They sold that to Tubi, which is kind of like the Temu of HBO Max. And if it wasn't for a fan campaign, Coyote vs. Acme would have met the same fate as Batgirl. So things are not going well for this company. And I'm kind of worried that like everybody forgot about Velma. Anybody remember there was a show about Velma? Yeah. Oh, okay, yeah, so some of those sounds either mean no or no, he's going to talk about Velma. Yeah, I totally am, because in 2023, when we all had a lot less to worry about apparently, the internet got super mad at a show called Velma, which was a precursor, prequel, whatever you want to call it, to the Scooby franchise. Now, let's be clear, the internet was being itself with some of the criticism because some of the characters ain't white no more. Oh no, internet, why? Why would you surprise me like that? Wasn't a surprise. However, if you watch the show, you could probably figure out that the show just wasn't good. Like, it was just kind of off. And we all got kind of like Mad Max levels of mad at a cartoon dog and its prequel. And that's great because now the internet has met me where I live. I've been mad at Scooby Doo for years. But not the OG Scooby Doo, and not Scooby himself. Remember, he's a good boy. Oh, no, sorry. Hang on, wrong dog. Okay. All right, I needed a minute. Sorry about that. There's been some malfunctions on the tech side. If you watch Scooby Doo from the beginning, it's a show that's associated with monsters and ghouls and haunted places. But what is the one characteristic about the original Scooby Doo? None of these are actual monsters. You were supposed to be like investigating, like the dog with the speech impediment taught you critical thinking. That was the whole point of the show. There are no actual monsters in Scooby Doo. The monsters are like just kind of rich guys in masks. So like, this is where the meme came from, by the way. Like, the whole thing in Scooby Doo is at the end of the thing, if you had a haunted theme park or you had like some kind of like shenanigans at a house, it's normally like a billionaire in a mask doing like tax bullshit. Like, they're just running scams in masks. And like this sequence, I had to cut this down from the meme. It's like 20 minutes on YouTube. I just had to pick like the choice ones. But capitalism is what was being haunted in Scooby Doo. Capitalism was the ghost. And anybody in here have a student loan? If you do, you're haunted by capitalism. I didn't see any hands go up, but it was sort of like, oh no. Interest rates, why? So the thing is, after the mergers, so like Hanna-Barbera got bought by Ted Turner. I used to live in Atlanta, so Ted Turner's kind of a thing. Turner Broadcasting bought it right before they started Cartoon Network. And so they had access to the catalog. And slowly over time, what happened to Scooby-Doo is that as it got into like weird crossover movies and kind of stretching the thinness of its IP, they started including actual monsters, like vampires and ghouls, like the werewolf showed up. So they're not even like rich monsters, they're just monsters. Like okay, the vampire's rich. But he's rich because he's a count, not because he's a vampire. I mean, like, ghosts are kind of nonsense, but y'all, compound interest is a thing. Anybody with a student loan kind of understands. You just want that to happen in reverse. If you've ever read the original Bram Stoker's Dracula or saw the movie Bram Stoker's Dracula, Bram Stoker was dead when it was made. I still like that film. You do have to realize that Keanu Reeves played a lawyer in that film, and Bram Stoker's Dracula opens with a real estate deal. Now, of course, the lawyer's almost eaten by succubi, so I'm not sure who to root for here. It does kind of point to the trend that Scooby Doo sort of started going off the kiddie park trail rails at the haunted theme park. So now you've got like actual monsters. Like, this is a clip from a Scooby Doo on Zombie Island movie, and Fred's trying to rip the mask off the monster. It's not a mask, he rips the zombie's head off. And then there's some live action movies, which James Gunn, the aforementioned director of The Suicide Squad and the Guardians of the Galaxy, like, he got his big break writing for the live action Scooby Doo movies. But he went all in on monsters, which kind of like soured me to it. But then he made Scrappy Doo a villain and it instantly won me back. So James and I are on pretty good terms. So now in the fiction world, we've got the Scooby Gang out here doing like Ghostbusters shit, right? And in the real world, the one we live in, billionaires are still doing tax scams and they're not even bothering to wear masks, which is extremely disappointing. And we still don't have Bigfoot in Oregon. I can't even with that. But at least we got He-Man out of it. Okay, you're not seeing the connection here. So He-Man ran for 2 seasons, the original He-Man and Masters of the Universe extended toy commercial. It wasn't a toy commercial, it was educational programming because there was a life lesson at the end that's very important for legal reasons. Barely, because we talked about Reagan earlier, and so some things weren't happening in the 80s, like regulation. But this is essentially the template. I told you a bunch of shows followed Scooby-Doo. They did this with He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. So you've got Velma, you've got Daphne, you've got Fred. Fred drove the van. Yeah, there's actually a van in episode 1 of He-Man. It's called the Attack Track, and it looks absolutely nothing like the toy. It's very disappointing as a child. But then you get down to Prince Adam and Cringer, and this is obviously Shaggy and Scooby. Because they're cowardly. One of them has a speech impediment. And they somehow summon the Sword of Power and become heroic figures. And if you're not familiar with the Sword of Power, it's kind of like the combination between, I don't know, a Scooby Snacks and a peptide shot. So he kind of broed out on us, but again, life lesson at the end, still all good. But now Skeletor is the villain. He is the billionaire up on his throne doing billionaire shit. And he's always the creepy guy at the end that gets unmasked. It's Skeletor every single time. Whoa, who would know? Oh. But again, like the billionaire thing is going to come back because, okay, let's go back to Velma. Okay, don't actually watch Velma. Velma's kind of trash, but Velma kind of shows this evolution of the media going sort of south. And this whole Monsters and Scooby Doo thing, I believe is why, I heartfelt believe is why we have ghost hunters on television. Stay with me. I don't like ghost hunters at all. Not because like I think ghosts are bullshit. Okay, ghosts are bullshit. But some of y'all still go to voodoo for donuts, so I can't fix every single like weird hypothesis that you have. However, this is completely in the decline because it's not that I hate the ghost hunting franchise. I'm just a really big fan of home improvement shows. Stay with me here. Okay. A lot of this is the fault of David Zaslav. Let's go back to billionaire shit. So David Zaslav is the current owner of Warner Bros. Discovery. His Wikipedia page is just a history of taking media franchises and making them bigger and kind of thinning them out. He owned the Discovery Channel network, so that's HGTV and the Food Network and all that stuff. And Zaslav, the minute he came on the scene, started cutting everything. He's the guy who like did the Batgirl tax dodge. He's the reason why you can't watch Westworld on HBO anymore. It's on Tubi now. That took him like 2 years to sort out. He's kind of the reason why Sesame Street almost went under again and had to partner with Netflix because HBO was helping fund Sesame Street because apparently corporations do good things sometimes, question mark. But also that whole content purge thing I was telling you about, all those shows he eliminated, was mostly not to pay royalties, which apparently you need to live in Hollywood if you are a writer or an actor or a producer. So there's a whole bunch of people who had their shows made and they can't be seen anymore. Also, if the merger goes through, he's gonna make about $750 million from shoving these two companies together uncomfortably. The thing is, everybody involved in this deal kind of has bad vibes. And this is the bad thing about media. Like I'm a big sci-fi and fantasy fan, so like a lot of my favorite stuff is under this very shady umbrella they're about to build. And the vibes are like way, way off. The thing is, there's not much you can, what do you do about this? Like this is the thing that I was conflicted about writing this talk because I'd love to come away with like, oh, you can solve the problem this way. Some of my favorite stuff is on this list, not Harry Potter, screw that. But like a bunch of other stuff I absolutely love. And so what do? Do I encourage you to like fly the black flag and like find other ways to get your content? Or do you just like assume that some of your stuff is gonna be owned by shady people and you should just continue paying the bill to get the content? It's kind of unclear what to do here. But we gotta go back to Davey Z because there's a previous sin that happened in the Discovery Channel, which is the fact that Discovery used to be like a science-based network. And now you learn history from the History Channel, but it's taught by like, ancient alien theorists and gold diggers, not the ones on the Real Housewives, like the guys in Alaska who are actually trying to like get gold out of the ground. But he went this direction because it was cheap. Like you can basically just get a dude to go aliens, and that costs a lot less money than actually like hiring people who know that the pyramids were built by humans and not people who came from space, because that's just assumes things about natives that I don't want to get into here. So you end up with all this paranormal, ghost hunting, ghost seeking programming because 3 goths in a basement who suddenly get vibes is way cheaper. You don't even have to spend money on tripods. If you've ever watched these shows, it's a lot of this Blair Witch. We should have left that in the late 1900s. It's like you can get a gimbal on Temu. I didn't even know what, but everybody leaned into this because in 2007 we had another writer's strike. And so in 2008, everybody bought into reality programming, including this guy. This is the result of the 2007 writer's strike. I would love to move on from this as quickly as possible. I'm gonna hit the button. But Discovery completely leaned into this. So now you've got, like your food programming got a little less foodie and more competitive, and it involves the drama of the kitchen as opposed to is the shrimp actually scampi? And the thing is, it drifted into my genre as a homeowner, home improvement television, because HGTV has the same parent company. I told you, this was all connected. Davey Z, what have you done? But what you've done is cause a lot of confusion between the ghost hunting community and the house hunting community. All right, so I want to take a poll here. Which photo do you think actually came from an HGTV show? The one on your left or the one on your right? If it's the one on your left, raise your hand. If it's one on the right, raise your hand. Congratulations, you are perceptive. The creepy doll is from Good Bones. This is where you start to see the drift of the reality stuff and how it kind of creeps in to make all this stuff worse, because every episode of a ghost hunting show is half of a good episode of a home improvement show. Because the ghost hunters show up to the trashed house, the home improvement people stick around and fix it. So if you've got these two in your house, it's gonna get fixed. If you've got paranormal people, they're gonna ghost you, which is on brand. I mean, it's rude as hell, but it is 100% on brand, so I love the fact they're sticking with this. Imagine, if you will, one of these folks who does the paranormal thing, they get roped into doing a house hunters type of show. Would this work? Jack and Sheila are looking for a house in the Alberta district. She runs a kombucha stand. He fixes bicycles. Their combined budget is $885,000, but last year they spent it all on a camper van, #van life, 6 cameras, and an EMF meter that looks a lot like a digital multimeter from Alibaba Express. They're looking for something in the neighborhood that's possessed, but with their budget, they'll only be able to get something that's been repossessed. So no, this actually wouldn't work at all. And the crossovers are just gonna make things worse, especially when we get into things like Star Trek. I love me some Trek, but I don't know if this is gonna make my life better. But I can tell you that there is absolutely something worse than the inevitable HBO Paramount crossover. And it's this guy. Also, these two assholes. They were not good boys. Thank you. All right, I can attempt to answer questions if you have any, aside from why did they let him do this? For any homeowners in the room, I am so sorry for what I've done to your mental image. Yes?
How do you feel about Dropout TV?
I love Dropout. So Dropout, if you're not familiar with Dropout, is an independently owned media network in LA. It is, the old people used to do College Humor. Sam Reich, who is Robert Reich's son, like the ex-Secretary of Labor, Robert Reich, he's been a comic writer for years. And when College Humor was kind of going down the tubes, he somehow got finances to buy it from them. That's why it's called Dropout, because it's what happened after they left college. And it is almost entirely self-funded. They've got a really good app, and it's a lot of improv content. But there's also there's full Dungeons and Dragons campaigns. There's just very particular kinds of nerds there, and they let them do two really cool things. One is they let them kind of pitch their own programming. So sometimes they have a game show called Game Changer, and they had a game called Make Some Noise, which is mostly an improv cue thing. You see on Whose Line It Is It Anyway, but the prompts I think are a lot sharper. And they spun that off as its own show. And so this happens all the time. They'll do a gag, like crowd control. They have 3 comedians come in and just do crowd work, but they planted interesting stories in the audience and make it into a challenge. And they'll spin those things off into their own thing all the time. The second cool thing is that there's no exclusivity contract. So the old studio systems and things, you signed up with Warner Brothers back in the day, you can go work for MGM, right? You got locked in. And even if you're on Saturday Night Live, for instance, a lot of times they restrict your contract. Or if you're on NBC, nobody at ABC wants to play with you. Dropout doesn't care. So there's one of the comedians on Dropout, I can't remember his name, he's now a cast member on SNL, but he still bounces back and forth because he's got that kind of freedom. So it's actually a really interesting kind of network. It's slowly grown up from the bottom. But they got a shout out on Stephen Colbert 2 nights ago, so I thought that was kind of fun. We'll go.
I'm just glad I'm too old to follow this show.
That most of the time when I do one of these talks, it's this bridging divide of where do I put the jokes. I did a Y2K talk here at the end of last year, and when I was hey, who here was born after the year 2000? 2 people raised their hands, and I'm oh no. I think one of them was actually in the audience. Yeah, it was you, it wasn't me. Yeah. I was oh no, because I did that talk at DragonCon in front of a larger audience. It was half the audience was we don't know what the hell you're talking about, you crazy old person. And I'm perfect. I've got a divided room here. But yeah, I don't know what I'm saying half the time either, so we're all good here. I had a repeat customer in the back. Yeah.
So we have the situation where the mergers are happening, content IP gets consolidated under giant corporations.
Yeah.
How do you break out of that?
You know, if this was 3 years ago, I would have said YouTube, but that's gotten a little weird. I made content for, like, the reason a lot of this is so sci-fi based is I actually used to be the head of videography at DragonCon, which is like an East Coast giant, like 80,000 person science fiction convention. They have like a fake TV station that I kind of helped start. And so we make a lot of parodies of science fiction content, and now I like moderate panels. In fact, like a lot of the Star Trek guests, like I know personally. So this is a little too close to home, to be honest. But I don't know, there's a lot of really good independent content out there. It's hard to find. And when you're on something like a YouTube or a similar content platform, just the discovery part is hard enough. Like getting your content surfaced, you know, everybody talks about the algorithm. And it's actually like a real thing. Like that, and creators that have been on there, if you watch or subscribe to any YouTube channels, you see them pushing their Patreon really hard because they were making good red avenue till about like a year and a half ago. And then it's either the amount of content that came up or the ad rates going down that all these like creators just saw their watch levels and their content payouts just go down by like 25 to 30%. And so now they're trying to like figure out like what's the way we keep this funded. So it's a real hard one because it's really hard to like just go onto YouTube and like search for a thing, because if you just let the algorithm do its thing, then like you're gonna find all the people who didn't like that Velma was brown, and they're gonna be in your feed all the time. And so I have to be real careful what I search for, because like I watch one video and it's like, hey, you're a middle-aged white guy, you might like this. I'm like, nope, absolutely not. No, I'm not in that demographic. Like kind of a little weird. So I wish I had a great answer for that, otherwise it'd be the closing slide. But instead it's these guys. Sorry I'm making you look at them for so long. I at least pulled a younger picture, so yay. Yeah.
Slightly less orange.
It may just be the white balance, who knows? I think they white balanced him off of like the dog, honestly, so who knows? The guy in the middle, David Zaslav, he's been the villain in my billionaire shit story. So again, like he's the guy who just decided, like, you know what we should do when we buy a network is kill a lot of the programming and make it cheaper. So it's that kind of commodification of like, everything should be reality TV. So instead of learning about how DC works, you like talk to 6 housewives and figure out why they hate each other at brunch. Like, a little bit different vibes on this one.
All right, let's give him one more hit.
Thank you.